Good afternoon. Yesterday afternoon at approximately 2:24 p.m., officers responded to a 911 call for help in the 5800 block of Recife Way for a family disturbance not unlike countless similar calls they respond to every day. The type of call that frequently may not ultimately involve a crime, many times can be resolved by officers using their de-escalation skills and a little human compassion. This incident quickly took a different turn, ending tragically with an exchange of gunfire between officers and a heavily armed man. Gunfire came within arm's length of hitting multiple officers. Ultimately, the man who opened fire on officers was struck by an officer's round and is now deceased. The presence of firearms continues to present the greatest challenge in response to calls where mental health is a factor. Guns are ever present in our community, and the number of people who possess firearms, legally owned and not, only continues to increase. Like in this case, the presence of firearms is often not disclosed by 911 callers, but emerges without warning and turns what could be just a conversation into a potentially deadly confrontation. It's been less than 24 hours since the incident occurred, so what we know now may change as we are still in the very early stages of the investigation. What we know now and can share is the following. The call involved a 37-year-old man with mental health issues who lived in an ADU to the rear of his parents' residence. The man was reportedly off his medication and becoming physically aggressive with his parents. His parents called for help because he had become violent and was throwing objects at them in their house. Officers with crisis intervention mental health training were dispatched to the residence to stabilize the volatile situation. No weapons were reported by the caller. Officers walked down the side yard to make contact, and as they approached the ADU, the individual emerged and pointed a long gun directly at the officers. He then fled back towards the rear of the residence. Officers retreated out into the street to create distance from the suspect, to give themselves time to formulate a plan to hopefully de-escalate the rapidly escalating situation. By immediately pointing a firearm at officers, the man created an incredibly dangerous and volatile situation for everyone involved. Officers acted quickly to de-escalate the incident by obtaining the man's phone number from the family and calling him from a safe distance away. Officers were able to get the individual on the phone and attempted to slow the situation, calm the man down, and persuade him to leave the gun in the house and come out peacefully. After around 20 minutes of dialogue, the man hung up the phone. He then emerged from the side yard and fired at least one round at 4 officers who were taking cover behind a marked patrol car. The round struck the fender of the patrol car, which you can see in the photo on the screen. Crime scene investigators are still examining the patrol car, but it is likely that the vehicle's engine stopped the bullet and saved the officers from being hit. The individual then fled back towards the rear of the residence and out of sight. Additional officers had taken positions in the yard of the residence to the rear, on the street behind the home of the incident. Officers positioned in the rear yard observed the man jump the fence into the backyard they were in. They could see he was now armed with a shotgun and a rifle. The man landed in an elevated area of the yard. An exchange of gunfire then occurred between the man and one officer who was positioned with additional officers in that yard. The man ended up on the ground in an elevated position from the officers above a raised planted area, making it difficult to see if he was still holding either of the guns. His partially concealed location created a challenge for accessing the man to check on his condition and approach him safely. When officers were able to approach him, they observed at least one gunshot wound and pronounced the man deceased at the scene. During the gunfire exchange, the man was struck by at least one of the officers' rounds. At least one round fired by the man struck the house directly next to where this officer was positioned, narrowly missing them and other officers who were taking cover next to the house. The man was in possession of 4 firearms and at least 50 rounds of ammunition when they contacted him. In addition to the rifle and shotgun, he had on his person a loaded revolver and a loaded semi-automatic handgun. Notably, he also had hearing protection in his ears, possibly indicating he was anticipating a gunfight with police. One officer discharged their firearm during the incident. That officer had approximately 8.5 years of experience as a police officer. The officer was CIT trained and had their body-worn camera activated at the time of the shooting. The man involved was identified as 37-year-old Kareem Khan of San Jose. A search of his dwelling resulted in the discovery of an additional firearm, ammunition, loaded magazines, and firearm parts. This incident is a tragedy primarily because there was such easy access to firearms during a mental health crisis. These calls are always unpredictable, but are too often among the most dangerous situations our officers face. They escalate without warning, but when a gun is not involved, can many times be de-escalated just as quickly. With guns so often available in our community, there is always the possibility of the danger they pose, as they are potentially always lurking beneath the surface of seemingly routine mediations of disputes, disturbances, or low-level crimes. My heart goes out to the family who lost a loved one yesterday. I'm truly sorry for your loss. Weighing incredibly heavily on me is that last night I came very close to visiting multiple officers' families to deliver tragic news about their loved one. Seeing the bullet holes inches away from where my officers were standing is chilling. I'm extremely grateful no officers were hurt or killed yesterday, and I know that it was a combination of tactics and luck that made that possible. No officer wants this to be the outcome in a situation like this. While no officers were harmed, the officer who defended their life and those of their partners will be affected by this for the rest of their life. As with all San Jose Police Department officer-involved shootings, a thorough investigation is being completed by the department's homicide unit and the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. The case is also being monitored by the San Jose Police Department Internal Affairs Unit, the City Attorney's Office, and the Office of the Independent Police Auditor. And with that, I will take any questions. Yes, sir.
So you guys weren't told that he was armed in advance when you got the initial call. If families are looking at this and they're being menaced by a family member, and then they look at this result based on what happened, they're like, well, maybe I won't call police. What can you offer them in terms of to call police, but hopefully have a better ending in terms of what they should know, what you should know?
Well, we can never guarantee what the outcome of a call like this is going to be, and obviously I'm going to presume that the family did not know he had firearms because they were asked that question specifically and said he did not. So I'm going to assume that they didn't know that. So all they can do really is give us as much information as they have to try to resolve the situation. I don't know in a situation like this if there's any other entity that would have responded without the police. Because he was being violent towards his parents, I don't believe that any of the other either alternate response or co-response, I should say the alternate response entities available would have gone without us. And had they gone without us, if he had emerged with a firearm, then they would have retreated and called for us anyway. So I don't know that there is a scenario here where we would not have gotten involved at some point. Yes, sir.
So did the man fire at officers twice, once, and then they retreated, and then he hopped the fence and fired again?
At least twice. We're still trying to sort out exactly how many times, but he fired at officers who were in the front of his house across the street, and then he fired at the officers who were in the yard to the rear of his house. So two separate times in which he fired at the police officers.
And he had 4 guns on him the whole time, or the 2 separate incidents?
So I don't know how many guns he, obviously one at least, that he had in his possession when he fired at the officers who were in front of the house. But when he jumped the yard into the house to the rear, he had a rifle and a shotgun and a pistol and a revolver and loose ammunition and hearing protection in his ears. So one can presume that at least at that point he was anticipating some sort of armed confrontation with police.
And the timeline again was you're on the phone with him, 20 minutes, you're on the phone, he hangs up the phone, and then and that's when this escalation begins after the phone?
The escalation began as immediately upon the officers attempting to contact him. So remember, when they went down the side of the house to make contact with him, he emerged and pointed a rifle at them. So then they backed off, had some dialogue with him on the phone. When he hung up the phone, he then came out and fired a shot at the officers in the front of the house. So that was after the attempts to get him to surrender by phone.
And then can you just pick up that timeline from there after that initial?
I don't have the exact minute by minute, but
Sure.
but at some point after that, We attempted to call for more resources, attempted to set some containment on that house, and then he pretty shortly after that jumped into the rear yard. I don't know what prompted him exactly to jump into that rear yard, but as soon as he got in that yard, he fired around at the officers.
Gotcha. And this was behind the house, right? Behind.
Correct. So when I say we tried to set containment, obviously we knew now we had a difficult situation, public safety concerns for our safety, and so we started containing the house, and that includes putting officers in adjacent yards.
Do you know which mental health issue he had?
I don't have specifics on his mental health issues.
And the issue with time and distance, you can do that in the de-escalation and so forth. Up until what point? Is it the initial fire? Is it the jumping of the fence, which then threatens others? At what point does this effort to create time and distance and de-escalate sort of stop?
Well, de-escalation attempts never stopped until he aggressed on the officers. So again, as soon as officers went to speak to him, not knowing that he had any firearms whatsoever, and he pointed a firearm at them, they backed out, attempted phone conversation with him. I don't know what prompted him to aggress on the officers and fire around at them, but even at that point, we still attempted to keep him contained and find some way to safely resolve this situation. After that, I don't know what prompted him to then jump into the rear yard. Even if it was an attempt to escape, the amount of firearms he had on him, the hearing protection, is sort of an indication that he knew we were in the area and that he would probably confront us at some point.
And no idea where he got the firearms.
I don't know. The firearms were not registered to him. We are still in the process of trying to find out, if we can, to whom they should have belonged and how he got them.
And you know the correct spelling of his name?
Let me give you what I've got and make sure it's accurate. Karim, K-A-R-I-M, Khan, K-A-H-N is what I have.
And can you pronounce the name of the street?
I will pronounce what I believe it's the proper pronunciation, which is Recife. It's spelled like recipe, but with an F instead of a P, R-E-C-I-F-E way, South San Jose.
And any previous run-ins with you guys, or calls to the house, or issues with anybody else at the house?
We have had some contact with him in the past. I don't know the exact extent of that contact, but we have had some contact with him.
And any criminal record?
We don't release the criminal histories.
Okay, thank you guys. That concludes our press conference. If you guys have any other follow-up questions for us, you can email PIOs. We'll try to get the pictures to you guys if you would like those. I know the screens were a little finicky today. And if anyone would like Spanish afterwards, I'm available.
You'll email us out?
Yes, if you email SJPD Media Relations.
I'll email you.
Yeah, and then we'll send them out.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.